The mop bucket squeaked softly as Robert cleaned up a spilled soda near aisle 3. His weathered hands gripped the wooden handle with familiar ease, each motion deliberate and unhurried. A little girl with pigtails caught his eye and waved. The corners of his eyes crinkled as he smiled back, a brief moment of connection in his otherwise solitary day. From across the store, Greg Harper's voice shattered the moment. "Don't talk to the customers," he barked, pointing a finger at Robert. "You clean. That's all you're good for." Robert's smile faded, but the dignity in his posture never wavered. He simply nodded and returned to his work, the rhythm of his mop strokes never breaking. As closing time approached, the afternoon sun cast long shadows through the store windows. The security guard was just about to lock the front doors when two black military SUVs rolled into the parking lot, their tires crunching on the asphalt. The engines remained running, exhaust rising in the cool evening air. 3 officers stepped out, uniforms pressed sharp enough to cut paper, metals catching the last golden rays of sunlight. They walked with purpose, straight into the store. One of them carried a sealed envelope, gripped with reverence. They were there for the janitor. Robert Walters was 64 years old, with deep lines etched into his face like a map of a life fully lived. His eyes, a faded blue that had seen more than they ever spoke of, always seemed fixed on something distant. Every morning for 7 years, he arrived 15 minutes before his shift began. He would tie on his worn leather work gloves with meticulous care, then raise the American flag outside the store with a precision that went unnoticed by everyone else. In the quiet moments before the store opened, he would stand there, looking up at the flag as it caught the morning breeze, and something in his expression would shift like a man remembering a promise. No one asked why this ritual mattered to him, and Robert never volunteered an explanation. Greg Harper inherited the store from his father, but none of his compassion. He watched Robert through narrowed eyes, finding fault in everything the older man did. "You're too old to be useful," Greg said one morning when Robert's arthritis slowed his movements. "Should have retired years ago." When customers needed help finding items, Robert would quietly point the way. When shelves needed restocking after his cleaning was done, he would step in without being asked. When a young mother dropped her groceries while juggling a fussy toddler, Robert was there, picking up scattered cans and offering a kind word. And every time, Greg would appear. "Cleaners don't take initiative," he would say, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You mop, you don't manage." The younger employees caught on, mimicking their boss with snide remarks when Robert passed. Customers began to look through him rather than at him. But if the cruelty registered, Robert never showed it. His hands might tremble slightly when the mockery was particularly sharp, but his eyes remained clear, his movements steady. He just kept showing up. It was Friday afternoon, the store crowded with weekend shoppers. A young mother with exhaustion written across her face was trying to wrangle her toddler while balancing her groceries. The child's hand knocked into a box of cereal, sending it tumbling. Robert was there in an instant, bending despite the pain in his knees. "I've got it, ma'am," he said in his soft, gravelly voice. Before his fingers could close around the box, Greg's voice cut through the bustle of the store. "Do I look like I pay you to stock shelves?" The store fell silent. Every eye turned to watch. Robert straightened slowly, the box of cereal in his weathered hands. There was something in his eyes then, not anger, but a dignified sadness. "Just trying to help," he said quietly. Greg stepped closer, enjoying his audience. "Help by mopping. That's your job. You clean messes, not solve problems." A teenage girl at the counter pulled out her phone and began recording, her expression troubled. Robert looked at the box in his hands for a long moment. Then, with gentle care, he placed it back on the shelf. Without a word, he walked to the back room, his footsteps echoing in the uncomfortable silence. No argument, no outburst. Just the soft click of the employee door closing behind him. Saturday morning came, and with it, Robert's same time, same routine. If yesterday's humiliation weighed on him, it didn't show in the careful way he raised the flag or in the thoroughness of his work. At precisely 12:03 p.m., as Robert was cleaning the restrooms, the rumble of heavy engines drew customers to the front windows. Two black military SUVs with government plates pulled into the parking lot, positioning themselves with tactical precision near the entrance. The engines remained running. Three men stepped out, their boots polished to a mirror shine, their uniforms adorned with the quiet authority of earned respect rather than demanded deference. The tallest of them held a sealed envelope with official markings. They entered the store and moved directly to the counter where Greg was helping a customer. "We're looking for Robert Walters," the lead officer said, his voice carrying the weight of command. Greg raised an eyebrow, a smirk forming. "You mean the janitor?" he scoffed. The officer fixed him with a steady gaze that made Greg take an involuntary step back. "I mean Master Sergeant Robert Walters, U.S. Army Special Forces, retired, Bronze Star, Silver Star." The officer's voice softened with emotion. "The man who carried me 3 miles through enemy territory after I lost my leg. The man who saved 19 other soldiers that day." Whispers rippled through the store. A customer dropped her shopping basket with a clatter. The color drained from Greg's face. I didn't know," he stammered. The officer's expression was stone. "Clearly." The lead officer, Colonel James Merritt, according to his nameplate, carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a formal letter on Department of Defense letterhead, a handwritten note, and a service medal that caught the light. "We've been trying to deliver this for years," Colonel Merritt explained, his voice carrying to the growing crowd of onlookers. "He's turned down 3 separate ceremony invitations, said his work here mattered more." He unfolded the handwritten note and read aloud. "For the man who served his country quietly and never asked for thanks, we refuse to let your sacrifice go unacknowledged. Your brothers and sisters in arms salute you." By now, everyone had gathered, employees, customers, even delivery drivers who had stepped in to see what was happening. The little girl from aisle 3 pressed close to her mother, her eyes wide. Greg tried to speak. "If I had known about his service." Colonel Merritt cut him off with a raised hand. "You shouldn't need to know someone's medals to treat them with basic human dignity." The restroom door opened, and Robert emerged, wiping his hands on a paper towel. He froze when he saw the officers, his expression shifting from surprise to resignation. "Told you not to make a fuss, James," he said softly. Colonel Merritt's smile, the genuine smile that transformed his stern face. "Too late, Master Sergeant." He crossed the space between them and extended the letter and medal. Robert hesitated before taking them, his hands trembling slightly. "It's not about the ceremony," Colonel Merritt said. "It's about making sure you remember what we haven't forgotten." Robert's gaze moved slowly across the crowd, taking in Greg's ashamed face, the awed expressions of the staff, the little girl who had waved at him yesterday. His eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I'm just the janitor," he said, his voice barely audible. Colonel Merritt placed a hand on his shoulder. "No, sir. You're the reason men like me came home to our families." Greg made a public apology the following Monday, stumbling over words that couldn't possibly erase years of disrespect. Robert accepted it with the same quiet dignity he'd shown in the face of scorn. But he didn't return to mopping floors. Instead, with the colonel's help, Robert started volunteering at the local VA center, helping veterans navigate the system that had nearly forgotten him too. He spoke little about his own service, but listened for hours to others sharing theirs. The community, ashamed of their collective blindness, raised money for a veteran support program in his name. And outside Harper's General Store, a simple bronze plaque now reads, "In honor of Master Sergeant Robert Walters, who taught us that service comes in many forms and dignity belongs to all." 3 months later, Robert sat on a park bench beneath a sycamore tree, sunlight flickering through the leaves. He wasn't alone. 2 younger veterans flanked him, both in jeans and baseball caps. One talked animatedly, the other simply listened, nodding. Robert listened too, not as a hero, not as a leader, but as someone who understood the weight of silence. From across the park, a familiar voice shouted, "Mom, it's him, the mop guy." It was the little girl from aisle 3, the one who had waved at him months ago. She ran across the grass with a folded piece of paper in her hand. She held it out with both hands. A drawing. A stick figure with a mop in one hand and a medal in the other. I made this in school, she said proudly. Mom says you're a real hero. Robert smiled, deeper this time, unrestrained. He carefully folded the drawing and slid it into his coat pocket right next to his silver star. Thank you, he said softly. But I was just doing my job. The girl beamed. You were mopping floors. Exactly, Robert said. And sometimes that's exactly what the world needs.